So my plan is to show you guys a couple of slides just to get everybody on the same page with what we're talking about, and then to do a little bit of discussion about it and then meditate on it. And we'll just see how deeply we can go based on kind of the questions that arise and how familiar people are with the subject. This is one of the most advanced subjects in Buddhism. There's aspects of it you'll understand right away. There's lots of you who have heard this teaching many times. Anyway, I'm guessing it's a bit of a mixed crowd as usual, but I see a few of you familiar faces and I know that you know this story. Bear with me while we do a little bit of just bringing everyone up to speed. Okay, so slides. So we just need to kind of get our heads around the Buddhist worldview. This is the Buddhist worldview from the perspective of particularly Mahayana Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism. But we kind of divide things into basis, path, and result. So if we were to categorize kind of where different teachings go, we could divide them into these three ways. So the basis is like understanding reality. This is Buddhist science, this is Buddhist philosophy. You don't really have to do anything with this information. It's just kind of like establishing our worldview in a really general, expansive way. Here's how Buddhists believe matter exists. Here's how Buddhists believe sentience exists, mind, etc. It's just kind of a description of reality category. And then based on that, you have the path, which is understanding practice, which is what do you do with that information, right? What do you do with Buddhist science? What do you do with Buddhist philosophy? Then the actual practice, this is where we have like Buddhist religion, right? Or Buddhist spirituality, if religion's too loaded a term. And then we have the result of having done that practice. So the result is really the category of understanding enlightenment. What is Buddhahood? What is it like? What are the features? What are the characteristics? How is it caused? All that kind of stuff. So basis, path, result. So the basis, here's where we have the category for today's teachings. So today we're talking about the two truths, and this exists in the realm of just understanding Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist science. But because it's kind of dry to just talk about philosophy, we'll also be touching on the path aspect a bit as well. So the two truths, relative truth, ultimate truth. An example of relative truth would be what is true for an ordinary being, someone without realizations, someone like us. What is ultimate truth? That's what's true for an Arya being meditating on the emptiness of inherent existence. So an Arya being is someone who has realized reality directly, perceptually. So relative truth and ultimate truth are not two different truths outside of ourselves. We speak of them in terms of the person perceiving them. You ask yourself, true for who? True for what kind of mind? So when we're looking at the basis, the two truths, I think it can be helpful to think of what we already understand from science and evolution and like the animal world. So for example, hawks have the ability to see far more vastly than we do, right? They really have a much different quality to their eyesight than we do. And so would we say that the things that are beyond our conception, beyond our perception in terms of sight don't exist just because we don't see them, but a hawk does? We wouldn't say that, right? We'd be like, ah, that's kind of the realm of the hawk. For us, we only see this far. Hawks see so far. So true for who, right? True for people with these kind of eyes or those kind of eyes. Does it kind of make sense? Yeah, so we're talking about what's true for us as ordinary people without realizations, and then what's true for these very advanced meditators. This is phenomena really exists differently to those minds. For someone like us, for an ordinary being like us, everything has like a lens or a filter or a veil where everything appears to exist inherently. And we say appear as if appear was sight, but it's like a seeming. It's like a quality of seeming. Everything seems to exist independent of causes. It seems to just be as it is in an obvious way, divorced from context, and we don't often challenge that. And even when we do challenge it, it takes a few steps for us to kind of break the spell of our default setting. So what we want to do is to be really understanding how ultimate truth is from a perspective of logic, from this perspective of kind of exploring with some kind of experience, and then repeating that and repeating that, we pierce the veil. So the basis is talking about the two truths. Then the spoiler alert, what do you do with that information? You practice the path. The path is the two accumulations or the two wings, what you do with that information just described. So we have the practices of method and the practices of wisdom. So method, for example, compassion, wisdom, for example, the correct view. So they're called accumulations because you're accumulating momentum. You're accumulating like a critical mass. You're accumulating positive karma, which is really fundamentally repetitive, positive thought that is accurate. And when I say positive, I don't mean kind of like flaky positive or like wishful thinking or too much positive psychology. When I say positive, I mean like beneficial to sentient beings. Positive in the sense of it has an awareness of interdependence, it has a sense of civic responsibility, and even more than that, altruism that really thinks my practice is not just for myself. My practice is in order to benefit all sentient beings. So anything of the like warm, fuzzy variety goes under the heading of method. Yeah, loving kindness, compassion, altruism, bodhicitta, all those beautiful, kind, amazing essential qualities go under the category of practice called method. And you're accumulating a certain kind of strength for those thoughts so that after a while, it moves from your head to your heart, right? Through repetition, through clarity, again and again, you think these things, and then they become who you are. They inform all your other thoughts. So then when we talk about wisdom, we're talking about something much more specific. We're talking about a much shorter list. When we're talking about the accumulation of wisdom, we're talking about accumulating the wisdom, realizing how reality actually is. We're accumulating many thoughts that are an accurate analysis of reality, ultimate reality. And so this kind of wisdom or this kind of correct view will take a while to kind of get our heads around. But even if you can kind of start to touch that very simple truth that nothing exists all by itself. You don't, the world doesn't, situations don't, objects don't. Nothing exists all by itself, independent of other things. It really changes the way you interact with the world. It really changes the way you see yourself. It really changes the way you view your relationships. If you think, my opinions, my views, my perceptions all arose from countless causes and conditions, and my perception of truth is very different than other people's. Take a simple example of one of your closest friends who you love. You know them, you love them, and you also know that there are people who think they are no good, who find them very annoying, right? So if they were beautiful and lovely in and of themselves, independent from context, independent from history and relationship, everyone would have the same opinion, and you know that's not the case, right? And you say, oh, well, if they only knew them. Yeah, but from their perspective, they do know them, and they come to the conclusion they are very annoying, right? So it's just as true for them as it is for you. Yeah. And these are really obvious things. These are things you know just from being a regular person in the world, a regular adult who has lived a life. This has nothing to do with Buddhism. You can kind of, take a few moments of thought and go, oh, okay, it's just my opinion. Yeah. And it starts to kind of loosen things a little bit. But we want to take that kind of thinking many steps further. Okay. So we got the two truths, we got the two accumulations. The two accumulations are often called the two wings because you need both of them to progress on the path. You need both method and wisdom. If you only had method, you would really be missing an essential perspective. If you only had wisdom, you would be very much missing essential kind of warmth, connection. So then the result of all of this is the two Buddha bodies. So we have Rupakaya and Dharmakaya. Form body for others, wisdom body, freedom for oneself. So an example of a Rupakaya or a form body is the Nirmanakaya of Shakyamuni Buddha, the historical Buddha. And an example of the Dharmakaya is the Jhana Dharmakaya, the Jhanakaya of the Shakyamuni Buddha. So his kind of wisdom truth body. So, this kind of form of the Buddha, where he's got golden color, where he's sitting on a lotus, a sun, and a moon disk, where he's radiating light, where his head is in a top knot. This is the Nirmanakaya aspect that was only perceivable by people who had really purified karma. For people who lived during the Buddhist time that didn't have very purified karma, they would just have seen a regular person with a regular skin tone of a kind of Nepali Indian variety with a shaved head, dressed like a monk, not necessarily radiating light. He would have just looked like a regular guy. But for people with purified karma, he would have appeared in this kind of grand radiating aspect, they say. So the result of having done those practices of method and wisdom are these two bodies or these two kayas. And this is Buddhahood. This is enlightenment. This is what we want. It's the result of practice. Okay. So here's the whole thing. Basis, two truths, relative truth, ultimate truth. Path, two accumulations, method, wisdom. Result, two bodies, form body, truth body. So this is just setting the scene, and then we're going to drill down into the two truths. So are there any questions so far? Have I lost you, or are you still processing? Have I had too much coffee? Any questions so far? Does it feel generally like you're with me? You're like up for more, or you kind of, yeah, okay. Yeah, good. Okay. Okay, wonderful. So when we're thinking about what do we do with this information, we want to really look at, okay, what is practice? What is practice? What is practice based in? It has to be based in an accurate observation, right? We don't want to be practicing and putting all sorts of effort into something that's meaningless or something that will bear no fruit. So you kind of reverse engineer it. You think, okay, if I want to be a Buddha, I have to practice these paths. If I want to practice these paths, I have to understand this basis. Yeah, you with me? So let's assume we all want to be a Buddha. Let's just assume, even if that's not the case, you might just want to be a nice person or you want to be a little bit more relaxed. That's also okay. But assuming you want to reach your fullest potential as a being with sentience, what do you do? Okay, so moving through all the way from the end back to the beginning. Okay, who am I? Who are you? At the basis. Not what you should do, not how you should think about it, but just like how do you describe a being? Something with a mind, maybe. Yeah, something with a mind, something with experience, something with memory, maybe, something like this. What is a being? Who am I? What is the basis that we label self or being on? Yeah, like how many components have to be there before you're like, yeah, that's a being there. Is just a mind enough? Is just a body enough? Does there have to be some kind of animation? Does there have to be some sort of communication? What is the criteria for that is a sentient being as opposed to that is just a thing, a phenomena, an external object? Yeah, like we could argue about trees, couldn't we? We could say, is a tree a sentient being or is a tree not a sentient being? Trees seem to store some sort of knowledge. They seem to communicate in some kind of subtle way. Maybe they are, who knows? At the end of the day, what we're really asking ourselves is, who are you? Yeah. Because when you have a very concrete sense of yourself, you very quickly distinguish other. And when you distinguish other, you put people in categories of ones that help me and ones that don't. Yeah, ones I like, ones I don't like. And that categorization, there's some strange logic in us that seems to be saying, like, if I don't like you, that should somehow help you be a better person. Me not liking you, right? Me not liking you should kind of help you correct your behavior, right? Me liking you should help you be in your best version more often. Like, what do we think like and dislike does to the world? We have some funny idea like we have to hold these opinions because it's going to do something externally. These opinions only serve to agitate us. And it's not that we can't have them. what we're asking ourselves is, what is a healthy, functional way of viewing your own opinions about self and others? What is a healthy, functional way? Because if you make it too concrete and you're all likes and dislikes all day long, I like this, I don't like that, I like them, I don't like them, then internally is where the effect is. That's the first effect. Internally, you're just full of push and pull, push and pull. More of this, less of that, more of this, less of that. Come here, go away, come here, go away. Stay, 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 leave, leave, leave. And internally, you just have this agitation. And it might be very low level, might just be mild anxiety or like a quiet rumble under the surface of like a moderate discontent. But that's kind of how we are most of the day, is like not quite satisfied because something or someone is too much or not enough. And we really don't understand how dysfunctional making that concrete is, how much it hurts us to live with such certainty about our own opinions. Yeah. And so, what if you were to say, this person behaves in a way that is not my preference? This person behaves in a way that I do prefer. Just a little bit of space. You're not fundamentally changing your opinions, but you're kind of relaxing around it a bit. I'm identifying behaviors and I'm taking responsibility for my own opinion about those behaviors. It's kind of empowering and it puts less on them, which means they're not in charge now of giving you happiness or suffering. You gave them all this power, they didn't even want it. Yeah? You're taking the power back by thinking, I have a preference here, I have a preference there. It's just a preference born from my life so far. It's not existing from its own side. It's like when someone does something very rude, if you can think to yourself, okay, well, given my life, given my upbringing, I label that as rude. But there are a million things that people do that could be classified as rude that don't get to me, that don't annoy me at all. Yeah. And a friend could say, oh, isn't that rude? And you'd say, yeah, I know why you'd think that, but it doesn't get to me, right? Why this is the question. Of all the rude things that people do, why does this one get under your skin? It feels inevitable. It feels choiceless. I have to feel this way when I see this behavior. And there's actually a gap there. There can be an opinion and space and a different response. But we miss that little window to change the way we think. With me so far? Okay. So if you're just kind of unpacking your life and how all day, every day, you're kind of in push, pull, too much, not enough, and that is not how you want to live, it's very useful to think kind of expansively and to think low stakes, not too confronting right away, about what's another way of looking at things, and then to gradually bring it more and more and more and more personal, more and more and more specific to your own experience. If you start with a deep dive into your own reactivity, sometimes what will happen is that you crumple into depression thinking that you're a bad person, or you get reactive and critical and judgmental of other people because you're like, look, I'm not so bad. Look at what they do. Right, so you either implode or you explode if you go in too hard too fast. So it's good to kind of start really spacious and abstract, and then we're going to bring it in and talk about the individual. Okay, so basis, two truths, relative truth, ultimate truth. Okay, so these are two ways of relating to phenomena. Conventional, relative, or all-obscuring truth, truth to a worldly mind, ours. Ultimate truth, truth to a mind engaged in ultimate analysis. Okay, so these are not outside truths, but truth from the perspective of different minds. So to realize emptiness, which is ultimate truth, emptiness is ultimate truth, but not emptiness, but the emptiness of inherent existence, we have to start with understanding dependent arising, which is the reason why things are empty. Okay, so absolutely everything, phenomena, people, situations, objects, everything is empty of inherent existence because it dependently arises. So this is called the king of reasons, proving the middle way between nihilism and absolutism or eternalism. This is the middle way that Buddhists talk about all the time, is not being in nihilism, not being in eternalism, but actually nailing what emptiness is by seeing it's empty of inherent existence, intrinsic existence, independent existence, because independence on many other things, there is a rising. Okay, so that king of reasons, right? This is the way to develop wisdom that correctly realizes ultimate reality. So you think, all right, all phenomena are empty of inherent existence because they dependently arise. How do I work with that in terms of a meditation or in terms of adjusting a worldview? So let's unpack it a little bit. Den, dependent. This is from Geshe Samten's book, Geshe Samten at Vajrayana Institute in Sydney. He's lovely if you haven't met him. In his book on A Praise to Dependent Arising, he explains it this way, that this part of the word, den, corresponds to dependent, indicating that things exist independent on other factors. Those factors could be causes and conditions, the parts and the whole, and dependence on being posited through a process of labeling. Drell, the other part of the word, corresponds to arising. If something is an arising, that means it arises due to its relationship with something else. If the proper causes and conditions, parts, and the process of being merely labeled all come together, then a phenomena can arise. So what does this mean in terms of your relationship with your nosy neighbor? How does this relate in terms of the angst you feel at 9 o'clock at night if you're all by yourself? How does this relate to how you feel when you read the news and something distressing is happening? What do you do with this? Thoughts? How do you plug this kind of philosophical concept into a moment of reactivity in your daily life? Do you have thoughts how you might workshop it? Too soon? Yeah, Deborah, go ahead.
Oops, I've got voice. One of the things I do is I kind of bless the person or the situation, and I give thanks for it, and I send compassion or whatever, and it helps me distance a little bit from my own immediate reactions, and helps me feel a more positive connection with
Mm.
the person or the situation.
Yeah, it's kind of like a fail safe, just go immediately to this can be a learning. I'm grateful to it. People are suffering, send them blessings and love. You kind of
Yeah,
preempt your mind from getting stressed out and agitated by it. Yeah, that's really skillful. Yeah. Yeah, perfect. Exactly. And that would go under the heading of method, and that's so essential. We need to be able to use the method side of the path or we're lost because the wisdom side of the path is going to take a lot longer to kick in. And so you could say, like, let's take something that's probably universal, which is you read something in the news that upsets you, right? Has this happened today? Maybe even, I don't know. Possibly something from my country. I'm so sorry. I didn't vote that way. Anyway, not naming names, but okay, so you read something distressing in the news and you're really feeling like upregulated and emotional about it. Now, your mind thinks you feel this way because of the news, but the news already existed before you read it. You weren't upset before you read it, right? It already existed though. So if it was the news that made you feel this way, just inherently by it existing, it would have that immediate impact. Yeah. Now, okay, you think, well, no, okay, it was the news existing and me reading it. That was the ingredients. Okay. What if you read the news right after you had a great conversation with a close friend where you'd been laughing and mucking about and just being full of nonsense, and you were giggling as you looked at the news, and then you went, oh, what a shame. That's not what we want. There's some space there, right? What if you read the news and something horrible in your personal life had just happened? Also colors it completely differently, right? So we're giving all of the credit to this like one ingredient of our experience when the ingredients of our experience are numberless. We could point to three or four, and that's actually plenty to like loosen the hold of the tightness of our grip on our opinions. Yeah. But, you know, it's more than three or four reasons we feel this way. It's countless reasons why we feel this way. But even just thinking it's more than one helps a little bit, right? It did not independently arise this way. It's important to just kind of play with it a little bit because we feel like our feelings are inevitable. Like there's no choice for me to feel anything other than what I feel. There's a space there for something new. And the way to bring the space into daily life is to really play with the mistakes in our perceptions when it's abstract, when it's low stakes. Then, when it's in our face and in our immediate life, we can relax a little bit. So, you have to kind of practice thinking this way so that when it's really vivid and up, it doesn't hook you. Okay. So, saying that something is dependent negates the idea that it could exist under its own power. Okay. So the news giving you this feeling doesn't exist from its own power. It dependently arises. This news being considered significant exists in relation to other news that you feel is insignificant. And the concepts of significant and insignificant are born through countless experiences in your life, as well as karmic conditioning. Right? So nothing exists under its own power. The idea that things arise negates the other extreme view, which is nihilism, right? Things do arise, but not all by themselves. So the question becomes, why do we need the wisdom realizing the emptiness of inherent existence? So the wisdom is the path, the emptiness of inherent existence is the basis. Why do we need wisdom that realizes that? And how is it developed? So, thoughts about why we need this wisdom. Why do we need to realize that things are empty? Because they dependently arise. What does it do fundamentally on the path to enlightenment? Yeah, Deborah, go ahead.
In the rare moments when I've genuinely understood that or felt that, it's liberating. It kind of it takes me to really a big perspective, and it generates compassion for everyone and all life, and for myself. So yeah, but it doesn't always come immediately. You know that kind of perception. But yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's liberating and it will take some practice before it just kicks in naturally, both. And so when we're thinking about why do we need the wisdom realizing emptiness, this is the direct antidote to the innate ignorance that has been with us from beginningless time. This is what cuts the patterns of suffering and ignorance. This is what cuts karma and disturbing emotions. So if we want to interrupt all of our bad habits, if we want to stop all of our bad habits, there is one antidote, and it is the wisdom realizing emptiness. Now, in order to be convinced and in order to be motivated, the path side really helps, right? Like, why do I need to stop suffering? Why do I need to stop being harmful? Why do I need to stop having ignorance? Well, because I'm hurting people unintentionally, including myself. I don't want to hurt people. Generating some compassion can make you very interested in pursuing the wisdom realizing emptiness. Yeah, I don't want to hurt people. And yet sometimes I do, either accidentally or carelessly, I hurt people and I do not want to. I need to cut the delusion that allows it. I need to cut the patterns of behavior that fuel it. I need to fundamentally undermine the problems in my perceptions. And so, if I want to stop uncontrolled rebirth, if I want to cut the root of samsara, I need the wisdom realizing emptiness. And so the question becomes, how is it developed? And really, it's developed through the same mind that got us into this mess that has been a mess, right? Like the classic story of the lotus born from mud has pure petals. Well, our mind in the mud all full of confusion and pain and yuckiness, still it can come out of that mud and be pure. So, really thinking about your own little mind actually is unbelievably powerful. It's just been misdirected. This powerful mind of ours has just been misdirected and also allowed to stay distracted. So if we can cut distraction and direct it accurately, we cut through all of those habits. Okay. So why do we need the wisdom realizing emptiness? When conjoined with the perfection of concentration, it leads to the profound realization that is the direct antidote to suffering and cyclic existence itself. How is it developed? A correct intellectual understanding is developed and then repeatedly meditated on, conjoined with calm abiding, this very powerful concentration. So, understanding it accurately and repeating that, it actually becomes fundamental to your thinking, fundamental to your being, and then you can't relearn the lie. You can't refabricate the spell or reintroduce the veil. You can't. You've cut through it. So there's a few different ways, and the first one is recognizing the object to be negated. So the self that seems inherent, especially when upset, see that it can't be inherent, that that's impossible. Another way is to recognize dependent arising, that for the self, others, and all phenomena to be, there must be supports. And then another is to understand the fallacy of belief in inherent existence and the logic of the emptiness of it. So, lots of different ways to realize emptiness, lots of different ways to realize ultimate truth. And, these are kind of three main ways, but we'll just look at this first one, this recognizing the object to be negated. So, the object is the self, but what is negated is it having the characteristic of being inherently existent. So, we recognize it through provoking it into prominence by remembering past moments of strong belief in it, then disproving the self's existence in an inherent way through logic. So the self is not to be negated. The self seeming to inherently exist is what's to be negated. Okay? So you view the self, your good old self, right? However you find it, and then you try to provoke that feeling of very concrete I that arises when you're in danger, when you're being celebrated, when you're being hated, when there's a really big emotion or a threat. Yeah. When you feel particularly me. Yeah. So we often use like, think of a time when you're angry, but you could just as easily think of a time when you've been really celebrated. I don't know, some birthday party and everybody's singing your praises, or, I don't know, an office party and you're retiring and everyone's going on about your accomplishments before you retire. You did this and you did that. The I gets more and more kind of like, I'm amazing, or, oh my God, I'm not. This is so embarrassing. Either way, the I is strongly felt. Yeah, whether you're embarrassed or impressed with yourself, the I is strongly felt. When you're just kind of sitting in your living room relaxed and you're just with people that you're used to and nothing big is going on, the I is not causing a lot of obvious trouble. So think of the times when it's prominently up. That is the one that you're trying to prove doesn't exist at all. Okay? There's the self that exists, and there's the self that does not exist. The self that does not exist is the one that seems independent. Okay? So when you're finding this quote object of negation or the false self, the pretender, you have to provoke it a little bit by using your memories or using some sort of, I don't know, fantasy of some kind. I always think of a cop show. You guys have probably heard me use this analogy, the cop show analogy, right? Where the object of negation is the perp, right? The guy in trouble with the law, right? The guy in trouble with the law is like in the interview room, and then there's good cop and bad cop, right? And good cop is like, of course you've said harmful things and done bad things to sentient beings. You're only human. Look at how you grew up. Look at all these aches and pains you have. Look at how stressed you are. Of course you did the wrong thing. There, there, there. And then bad cop says, "How dare you? You're bad. You're primordially evil. You should be put to straight to hell. You should be banished from society. People should stop loving you." Right? So you have good cop and you have bad cop telling you about what you've done. Yeah, and the perp eventually cracks and says, "Okay, I did it. Okay, I did it." Yeah. So what we're trying to do is get our object of negation to say, "Okay, okay, I do think that I'm that concrete. I do think that I'm that independent. There's a part of my logic that knows better, but fundamentally, it feels like I've been the same person all of my life. I've just added experiences and learned things on top of some sort of core that's been the same since my first memory." Kind of feels that way, right? You think of yourself as a little tiny child. You were not that little tiny child. But there is a continuum, right? There's a continuum of patterns from then until now. There is experiences from then until now. There is learning, but there's not an essential selfness that's there the whole time. There's a labeling of self. There's a continuity of labeling self on that mental continuum. But that mental continuum is like a river, changing every second. You don't say there's like a core of a river, right? That would be absurd. What's the core of the river? Some current? Okay, where's the core of the current? Like you can't find it. There's a river there. There's a mental continuum there. There's a stream of consciousness there. But really think of it that way. Like from a distance, you can say this river is called this or that, right? But no, there is no essential river there. It crosses to another country, it gets a new name. Yeah, and then you think, oh, well, maybe the bank of the river, maybe the bottom of the river. None of those things are stable. None of those things are findable. Try to find it. From a distance, no problem. Zoom in, it disappears. Yeah. Okay. So finding this object of negation first is very confronting because this is the self that feels like it needs to be defended, that needs to be understood, that needs to be loved. And you can't be too harsh with it when you find it. Once the perp has been confessed, right? Once your little perpetrator has said, "Yes, I did it. I am the object of negation," then good cop has to soothe it and give it a cup of coffee and say, "Don't worry, we'll find you a good lawyer," right? So that it doesn't freak out. Because what happens for us in our analysis is we go in too hard too fast and we lose having captured it. So you have to kind of be a little bit delicate and like allow that feeling of the false self to arise and then very gently challenge where it seems to be independent. Yeah, where it seems to be self-existent. So it might start very superficial. It might start with your nationality or your gender or your perception of how smart you are or how kind you are, some defining characteristic of you, right? And then you look at any defining characteristic of you and you see that it was learned, either through someone taught you or you learned it through experience. Is it yours? It lives here, right? It's not yours, it's not you. You look at anything about yourself that you feel like is a core you thing, cannot find it. Yeah. And so when you start to loosen up about your own identity, then you can start to loosen up about how you identify others. And when you can loosen up about all of that, you stop creating so much negative karma because you're not so reactive. Does it make sense? Not so far? Questions so far? You with me? Yeah? No? Yep. Thumbs up. Okay. Okay, so the object of negation is a really important first step, but just kind of seeing what is the lie I tell myself about myself, the story of myself, all of the chapters of myself, me being the hero or the victim, right? Me being the protagonist somehow, me being the main character is not the case. I just seem to be to my own mind's eye. And if you can kind of let that dissolve, then you're ready to kind of do a bit more of a deep dive. So you can look at dependent arising And ways of looking at dependent arising are seeing that all impermanent phenomena depend on causes and conditions in order to arise. This includes your mind, right? Your mind is a changeable phenomena, impermanent in the sense of changing moment to moment. What is the substantial cause of your mind? The previous moment of your mind. What are the conditions for that? Your karma ripening, your external environment, the people interacting with you, etc., countless things. But for you to have the mental state that you're having right now is not owned or independent, right? You didn't make yourself feel this way. You didn't make yourself think this way. But it sort of feels like you did, right? There's an interesting paradox in our thinking where on one hand we feel like we are in control of our thoughts and emotions and they are us and this is who we are. And then on the other hand, we feel like we're in no control whatsoever of our thoughts and emotions and they're all everyone else's fault. We have a very funny paradox way of thinking. And depending on how relaxed we are that day, it tips one way or the other. We either give too much responsibility to our own intentions or not enough. Yeah, this is all my fault, or it's not my fault at all. Nothing is that simple. This is all something I can celebrate of I did it all by myself, or oh no, 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 I had no part in it. Right? And we're too black and white. None of that is true, right? Everything about this mind, this mental consciousness in this moment dependently arose. Yeah. So it's informed by the habits of the past, just like psychology would say. But how far past is the question? And what are the immediate conditions that are watering it? So you're just starting to think, okay, well, I have a degree of control. I have a degree of responsibility, but I don't have complete control and I don't have complete responsibility. It's delicate because you don't want to like let yourself off the hook for bad behavior, not useful. But you also don't want to identify with your bad behavior and say, therefore, I'm a bad person. It's just, there's a habit pattern here. Shall I remove it or not? Shall I strengthen it or not? How much control do I have over strengthening it or weakening it? You have your anger, you decide it's not useful. Can you just stop being angry when you see that it's not useful? No. But you can start to work on undermining it gently, gently with intentional practice. Yeah. You see that you're loving and that you're patient. Can you just make yourself more loving, more patient, just drop of a hat? No. You have to cultivate it. You have to build it. It's a tool, right? So, causes and conditions, really important. Then mutual dependency, dependent arising, that is all permanent and impermanent phenomena depend on parts and whole as well as context in order to arise. So applying this to ourself, okay? So to say this is me depends on many, many parts and a contrast with other, which brings us to our last one, which is that all phenomena, permanent and impermanent, depend on mind's imputation on a valid basis. So this basis is something that, the world agrees, yeah, that's a person, that's a human being, not an animal. Yes, that's a chair. Yes, that's a table. No one's arguing about the kind of basic relative truth, but we are looking at then the extra layers on top of it. And that's what we want to start to undermine. So understanding the fallacy of belief in an inherent existence and the logic of the emptiness of it. Okay. So think things in general, or myself in particular, do not exist inherently or have a natural, as in causeless existence. Because if they did, they would not have to depend on other factors. They could spontaneously arise out of nowhere. So I say that as if it's just obvious and self-evident, but does it feel like there are some things that arise spontaneously out of nowhere, causelessly? Yeah, that just happen by chance. Is there anything that happens just by chance? Any thought, any emotion, any person, any situation, anything, just by chance, causelessly. And it's kind of like before you thought about it, you'd say, yeah, sure. And then you think about it for 3 seconds and you're like, oh, wait, no. Yeah, I guess not. Weird. Okay. Right? It's interesting. It's interesting. So, these are all kind of things to play with, but also to think things are not established by way of their own characteristics. Okay, so things have characteristics. They have features, they have qualities, they have, attributes, but they're not established by those attributes or characteristics. Because if they did, they wouldn't need to be imputed or labeled by language and conception, because they would already exist because of their own characteristics. Characteristics would equal creation. Okay. So we can say there's a car and there are characteristics of a car having an engine and doors and whatever cars have. I don't know. Right. Those are characteristics of a car. We point to the parts. But if it was inherently car, we wouldn't need to label car or be introduced to the concept of car at some point in our early childhood. It would just be naturally known, right? It having characteristics of a car would automatically equal car, even if we were from a culture where there were no cars. We would just magically know it. But we actually have to be introduced. So when you think of people, good people, bad people, it's like we feel like it's as obvious as that's a car, that's a chair. Yeah. Forgetting that we were introduced to the idea these characteristics equal a bad person, these characteristics equal a good person. How many, quote, bad characteristics do there need to be before they get the brand bad? How many good characteristics before they get the brand good? Right? You're like, exactly five. Right? No one says that, right? That is a bad person because there are precisely five things that are very annoying, right? But if there were four, they'd just be a mildly irritating person, not bad. Yeah, I mean, like we're not that simplistic. And yet there is something overly simplistic in our thinking that thinks, oh, it is obvious that is a bad person. Oh, that is obvious that is a good person. We were introduced to these ideas, now we believe in them, and they seem to come from the side of the person. And we reinforce it by telling ourselves old stories. So, an emptiness meditation is primordially changing the story. Yeah. So you're retelling the story of self. You're retelling the story of other. You're retelling the story of situations through the lens of dependent arising rather than the lens of hero and victim. Does it make sense? It doesn't mean we say bad things are good or good things are bad, or up is down is up. We don't go crazy like that. That would be moving into the extremes. Ethics still hold, right? But there are so many things on top that are just a matter of opinion and experience. And ethics themselves exist in context, right? What is harmful to one person is not harmful to another. How do we work it out? Well, from our side, we have to use our common sense and our intention of refraining from harm. But we all know that we can have the best of intentions and nevertheless hurt someone's feelings, right? So we do our best with our intentions. We do our best with very cut and dry. Here's what you do with your body. Here's what you do with your speech. Here's what you do with your mind, so as not to hurt yourself and others. The classics that all world religions share remain true, right? Don't kill people. Don't steal stuff. Don't take people's partners, right? Speak truly. Don't speak divisively. Try to think well of each other. These are classics, right? These are not the copyright of Buddhism. Yeah. So you don't have to like overthink those. Just realize that those also exist in a context. You can talk about them in the abstract very concretely, but as soon as you're in amongst it in daily life, it becomes a little bit more nuanced, right? So loosening up the story, retelling the story, coming back to the story through a new lens. It's just like when you finally make peace with someone, you probably have to retell the story of the conflict between you through the lens of some kind of compassion and understanding. Maybe they did do a harmful thing, but you have more perspective of why and how and what informed that behavior. You have more perspective about why and how you reacted that way. The details remain. What happened, is what happened, but your whole feeling about it changes when you retell the story. So rather than that being kind of a haphazard, incidental kind of wisdom that you develop just by being an adult person trying to think good, right? You can do it in a lot more of an intentional way, in a more preemptive way by doing a meditation on emptiness. Yeah, more often, more consistently. Questions? Comments? Want to meditate? Oh, yeah, Eleanor, then meditate. Yes. Eleanor, go for it. We got a Kiwi in the house, you guys. Oh, you're still muted.
Mm. Um, I've heard this and I love this, and I still each time I hear it, I wish that I could decrease the space between my head and my heart, between my body and my mind, and come to understand, have a deeper understanding of emptiness in everyday life. Yeah, make it much more meaningful.
Do you feel like there's been any change over time?
There's been a huge change over time. Yes, yes, a lot. Yes, I do, but I still think I can hear it and understand it. I wish I could go deeper. I wish I could. I wish that thinking could go deeper and stay deeper instead of being um, not a momentary thing, but it's not consistently there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's quite
Mm.
relatable, right? Lots of us have heard this teaching before in some way or another, many, many times. And in hindsight, we're like, okay, I actually am a lot more spacious, a lot less reactive, a lot less judgmental, a lot happier. My baseline contentment is a lot more consistent. That actually is true, and I need to celebrate that. And at the same time, there's just so far to go and so much that you wish just would kick in. You're like, I know this, I've heard this, I believe this. Stay, right? And what
Yeah,
makes it stay
yeah.
is repetition, right? You have to just repeat and repeat. But
Mm.
there's a lot of different ways of repeating, and it doesn't always have to be the analytical way. I think it's important to give this analytical presentation for our logical mind to get its head around. But then experientially, and what I think we should do next is more like a Mahamudra meditation, which is informed by all these words. Let's just hold an observation of our mental experience playing out moment to moment without being reactive to it. So, there's lots of reasons for doing a non-reactive meditation, but from the perspective of Mahamudra meditation, it's a very clear lens of even my mind is not the self. My mind is part of the basis I label self on, but my mind itself dependently arises. You're not thinking that in the meditation, right? In the meditation, you're just watching your mental experience non-reactively, non-judgmentally, but not dissociative, not off with the fairies, not in outer space, spacious, not spacey, right? But the lens through which you kind of do what could be classed as like a clarity of mind meditation, it becomes more profound when the lens that you view the mind through is your awareness of it lacking inherent existence. And that's what's fueling your lack of reactivity. So we'll experiment a little bit with that and just kind of see how it goes. But sometimes when you're feeling stuck with your understanding of emptiness, you either need more analysis or more experiential. So if you've been telling yourself too many words, let the words rest and digest and do something a bit more experiential. If you're kind of off with the fairies and it's like there's some experience there, but it's lost clarity and it's lost connection, then you need to go back to analysis. Yeah, and just keep repeating, and
Mm.
trust that the repetition is doing the job because it already has hugely, and it's just we wish it would happen quicker. But beginningless time until now, we've had very funny habits. It's going to take a while to kind of like switcheroony. Don't give up.
True.
Give up.
Never, never.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah, Zach. Hearts for Eleanor. There we go. Go ahead.
Thank you so thank you so much, Venerable. I'm really enjoying the teaching. I was thinking about earlier when we were talking about, or you were teaching about identifying the object of negation. And one of the kind of fascinating and sometimes entertaining things for me is to watch how flexible that sense of identification is in terms of its ability to expand and also contract. And so you're hinting at this a little bit, like sometimes our sense of identity, it includes our body, and then if somebody has harmed somebody in our family, then it includes our family, and maybe it includes our community, and then it can expand, to nationality. It can expand to all of these just, huge constructs, and then conversely. Um, it's also interesting when we go through the kind of thought experiment of noticing how we say, my mind, my memories, my body, and that sense of who that inherent self is starts to shrink down to something so small that it is even the thing that is possessing my mind.
Mm.
So it's quite fascinating to think we use that kind of expression, yeah, regularly, my mind, my memories, without often even reflecting on, well, what is the thing there that is owning that mind? And so again, just that like huge flexibility of how expansive that sense of self can be, but also how contracted and invisible it can be as well. It's very slippery, and it always seems to be behind you.
Yeah. 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 Thank you for that. Yeah. There's an American in the house. There's two. Oh no.
So,
Sorry, guys.
all right, sorry everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Other thoughts, impressions. And, if there's a few people who are newer to these ideas, don't feel shy to ask what feels like a simple question, please. Anything. Before we do a little sit, you're very welcome to ask. Yeah. Nah, we're in Australia. If I go to an American classroom, I go, "What do you guys think?" They're like, "I couldn't. I'm so glad that you asked." Well, right. Yeah. Anyway, I miss you guys, even though you're not chatty. Okay. So, just let's take a minute, and before we even do the meditation, try and think of a time where the self needed to be defended, right? Really feel, and don't get lost in the story, but before you even meditate, just try to like really spaciously, like it was a time that you felt misunderstood, that you needed to defend yourself. Yeah, someone just didn't get your perspective, and you could really feel that like upregulated, but you don't understand me. That's not me at all. That feeling. I need to defend that one. And then just kind of really hold it gently, that self that feels like it was misunderstood, that it wasn't loved enough, or it wasn't supported enough, or it didn't get the credit it deserved, it was disrespected, that self, that little fragile self. Just kind of hold in that little fragile self and know it. Yeah, I know you, reactive one. And just kind of like mentally put it to one side. And then think of a different time. You're not even meditating, you're just playing with memory. Think of another time where you were very spacious about self, when you were really gracious. Maybe you were supporting someone who was going through a hard time, and you very much identified as, I'm coming in for you, whatever you need. Yeah, and you were really just like, whatever you need, I'm here. And there was kind of an openness, a graciousness, a spaciousness, that aspect of you that is a little less loud, a little bit more open, that has a flexibility to it. Do you feel kind of two versions of yourself? Right? Can you kind of like mentally identify, yeah, there's me when I'm like on, or when I'm grounded, or when I'm really like, this is me, right? This one that's really kind and open and there for people. And then the one who's all reactive and fragile, that one's not me, right? And if we're practicing method, the one that is grounded and gracious is the place of work, right? The one that is grounded and gracious, you want to make that one deeper and more connected and stronger. And if we're talking about method, the fragile one, that's the one that needs some challenging, that needs some subduing, that needs to be prevented from harming self and others, that needs a little bit of a lid on it. Yeah, cut it out, mate. Just. So if we're talking method, there's strategies for both of those. Increase one, diminish the other. If we're talking about wisdom, neither of them are you, right? You're like, what about the good one, though? What about the gracious, grounded one? No, that one's not you either. But that one is less problematic, right? When that one is the identity that's forefront, it is less problematic, but it is still not inherently existent. It is still not self. Yeah, it's part of the basis you label self on. So it gets really subtle, right? You strip back layers and strip back layers. So you start with that coarse one who's all reactive and problematic. That's you on a bad day. Okay, that one does not exist from its own side. That one does not exist inherently. Okay, that one arises through countless causes and conditions, history, feelings, etc. Okay. But then that sweet one, that kind one, that wise one, that grounded one also arises in dependence upon causes and conditions, experience and parts. It does not exist inherently either. So you just kind of like open layers and layers and layers of spaciousness. And they say that this Mahamudra meditation, the investigation you do to try and find the self, is you imagine that your mind is a vast ocean and your analysis is like a tiny little minnow that's investigating very quietly and subtly without disturbing the water in any way. You don't come in like a shark. Your tiny little minnow of investigation, going deeper and deeper into there is no self from its own side. There is no self from its own side. It's all water. It's not all nothing, right? It's all just this place of infinite possibility. Yeah, like a womb, not like outer space. Okay, so just kind of holding those ideas. Now let yourself shift into a meditation. First, just aware that you have a body, aware that you have a mind. Doesn't matter if it's the body and mind you'd prefer or not prefer, they are there. There's the experience of form, there's the experience of being in a body, there's the experience of mind, cognizing. And then gradually decrease your emphasis on the body and increase your emphasis on the mind. Still just watching, noticing the experience of sentience, noticing that your mind knows. And just let your mind have mental activity. Let it have movement. Let it have stillness. Let it be reflective. Let it be busy. And all the while, just observe non-reactively. non-judgmentally. And when the mind starts to make a train of thought with lots of words and ideas, see if you can let it go unresolved. No conclusion, not agreeing or disagreeing. Just wakefully alive to the moments unfolding, letting go of any sense of this experience being me, mine, or I. You're watching, but you're not waiting for anything to happen. Simple attentiveness that lets go whenever it starts to grasp. Present without feeling identification with presence of self. Your focus looking for somewhere to land. Let go of needing to land. As if objectless observation. Attentive, but not to anything in particular. wakeful and watching without seeking anything in particular. No attempt to solidify. And then in that spacious place of potential, invite compassion. Because everything dependently arises, there is infinite interdependence. The health of one area leads to the health of others. Harm and pain in one area similarly radiates. And so may every aspect of the interdependence of all these sentient beings be flooded with the light of compassion. May every sentient being be free of their suffering, free of the causes of their suffering, free of the illusion of separateness. And reinforce that union of both method and wisdom with Chenrezig's mantra. Om Mani Padme Hum. 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 And come back to awareness of your physical experience. And back to your awareness of the room and the space around you. And shifting your focus out of meditation. Okay. Okay. So that's kind of practicing as if you were letting go of innate ignorance, like practicing as if you'd broken the spell. And it really does help to do a meditation like that sometimes. And then sometimes do an analysis, do logic, do a deep dive, split the hairs, split the atom, don't split the atom, split the hairs, really like get down to like, what are we talking about here? Very precise, very logical. But then sometimes just practice as if it was already the case that you'd broken the spell of believing in an inherently existent self. Because there is some wisdom in us that kind of gets it, even if we can't put it into words. And so practice letting it play out on your meditation cushion and just kind of see what comes from that. Can be a useful way. Any questions? How did it go? Someone in the back of the compa?
Yep, we have one here.
Yeah, go for it.
Hi, Venerable Yonten. Realizing emptiness can't really be achieved without compassion, bodhicitta. But what comes first? Or does it all happen all at once?
Well, is that Gloria? No.
Yes, it is.
It is Gloria. Hey,
I
loved
thought-
it. So bodhicitta helps give you reasons why, right? It's like, why do I need to cut the root of suffering? Why do I need to cut the root of harmfulness? Because I want to work for the welfare of all sentient beings. So it gives you fuel, but you can realize emptiness without realizing bodhicitta. For example, people in the Theravadan tradition, right? People in the Theravadan tradition really seek to just overcome self-grasping ignorance. And when you overcome self-grasping ignorance, you become fundamentally non-harmful, but you're not proactively working to benefit sentient beings. So because we want to proactively work to benefit sentient beings, we need bodhicitta first. But actually, you could realize emptiness before then. Yeah. So in order to really get ourselves steady and stable, we need more reasons why to do this. And often we only really pursue practice when there's a crisis. And it's helpful to kind of remember the last crisis to give you more fuel to work before the next one. And one way to do that is to really work on your renunciation, your determination to be free from samsara, your intention to emerge from suffering and its causes by remembering suffering and its causes, but you're remembering the pain of your life in a really specific way, not in a, oh gosh, oy vey, but like, right, all of these things had causes beyond the immediate circumstantial drama of my life. All of this pain and suffering came from more than just the drama of my life. It came from very deep, innate causes which are removable. So if I want to get out of this mess and stop doing this to myself and others and stop being impacted negatively by others who either seek to harm intentionally or unintentionally, I have to cut it. So like renunciation gives you fuel, bodhicitta gives you fuel to really want to realize emptiness. And it also kind of takes the edge off of the everyday suffering and the everyday harmfulness while you work your way towards realizing emptiness. So theoretically, renunciation and bodhicitta come first. Wisdom realizing emptiness comes later, theoretically. Terms and conditions apply. And a good stable concentration is going to help all of that work a lot more efficiently. So your everyday mindfulness of just know what you're thinking and saying to yourself, know what you're doing, and correct whenever it kind of goes off track. Kind of that just very gentle course correction throughout the day internally of, did I lose the thread of my path? Did I get lost in the logistics and errands of the day? Did I get lost in the conversations and just kind of lose my path? Of course I did. It happens a million times. Just start again and start again and start again. And that kind of thing actually really helps your concentration and focus, not just the meditation that you do. Your everyday just kind of like come back and come back and come back. Yeah. Yeah. Other thoughts, questions, ideas? Good. Carmen?
Hi, thank you so much for this talk. I'm just reflecting on how hard it is to quit the habit of being me in my everyday moment of every day. I could relate to what somebody else said about not being able to keep that connection throughout the day. And then during the meditation, thinking about those that more sort of virtuous part of myself that I consider to be kind and compassionate, how hard it is to strip that one away, because that's who I want to be.
Yeah.
So letting that one go is so much harder than letting the one go that I'd rather not have.
What if it was like behave as that one, but don't identify as that one?
Yeah.
It's something about creating like this primordial flexibility where it's like, okay, for these people, they need blunt, direct, lots of silly humor. For these people, they need a lot of spaciousness and care and a little bit of kind of disclaimers and buffering. You're able to like shift gears depending on your group of friends and the people who know and love you. We do little subtle shifting all the time for these people respond better to this kind of communication. These people respond better to that. We already do that, but we don't necessarily do it in a very like intentional way of here are the aspects of this mental continuum's habits that are useful for these people. No, we think this is me doing it and now me doing it, and that wouldn't be a problem, except what if people don't like it? Then you feel something to defend. Then you feel something to react against. Then you feel, oh no, reputation. So if you just kind of thought of using the ingredients that have landed here, the experiences that have landed here, in the way that you know best so far might help others without excessive identification, then people don't like it. You're like, oh, it didn't work. Oh well. And there's just a lot more space around it. So it's like all these versions of you, think of them as tools rather than things you have to get rid of completely. Think of them as tools you can access but don't over identify with. Because then if they think you're amazing, you get a big head. If they think you're horrible, then you fall into depression. If you just think these are
Yeah.
tools that I'm using, born from countless causes and conditions, then you're just like, I did my best. You know, it's something about this real flexibleness and this ability to pivot without taking anything personally. Because it never was, even if it landed here. It's like, what
Yeah.
person? Yeah. Yeah, gently, gently.